snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is Seveneves, which is by Neal Stephenson. I never thought I would pick up this book because it is labelled as hard science fiction, and I have not really read any hard science fiction. I don't even consider myself to have a real foundation in sci-fi yet. I've only read a couple of books in sci-fi and I've enjoyed a lot of them, but I haven't read a vast amount to be able to say that I'm well versed in sci-fi, so reading a hard science fiction book was kind of a tiny bit intimidating. But I picked this up because it was the pick of the month for my fantasy and science fiction reading group that I host on Goodreads. I'll put the link to that below if you guys want to check it out. I was quite happy that a lot of people were going to be reading it alongside me and we would be able to discuss it. So that kind of gave me the motivation to pick this up and give it a go. And I'm quite glad that I did, because even though it is a hard science fiction book, I didn't actually find it too difficult to grasp where the story was going and what was happening. There were a few moments which were a little bit overly sciencey, and I have heard from various people, like Elizabeth, that Neal Stephenson is known for going over the top in his science. Apparently what he does is he kind of gets obsessed with one thing and then he writes a book about it, and he gets really into the science of this thing and tells you all about it. So obviously in this one, the storyline is set after the moon implodes and bursts into 7 pieces. Earth is not sure what's going on. The moon just suddenly one day explodes and it's now 7 pieces. Of course, that's not in itself a big problem, but everything kind of revolves around the moon when you think about it, and there are problems in that the moon has now split into 7 pieces. Those pieces are going to crash into each other, stuff is going to go wrong with the orbit, and all of this crazy stuff is starting to happen. So when the moon implodes, basically it means that humanity have to act, and they have to figure out what is this going to mean for humanity, how are we going to deal with it, what are we going to do, and what will it mean for us as a race or a civilization. Quickly, the scientists of Earth discover that the moon imploding is a much bigger problem than just it becoming 7 pieces. It's going to affect the world in a very adverse way, and we are going to have about 2 years until everything goes into utter chaos and the temperatures of Earth go haywire and it's basically uninhabitable. So the plan is that there are a couple of people who are up in space currently. They have been working on a project to sort of mine out this asteroid and sort of discover more about it. They're the only people up in space currently, and they have a big enough space station that they can house a few more people, and potentially the asteroid that they are orbiting might be a good new home for some of the people of Earth. It's divided into 3 parts, this book. The first part is all about when the moon implodes. How is Earth going to deal with it? We meet a couple of characters who are on Earth and a few characters who are in space, and we see them talking to each other and interacting with each other and discussing all of the problems that might face Earth and humanity as a whole. We also get to see more about the sort of setup of how it came to be, and we get to sort of interact with some of the characters and learn a bit about their history, but honestly the characters were quite simple in this book. Like, they didn't feel overly developed. It was definitely more focused on the science, and part 2 of the book, which is the longest part I think, definitely focuses on the science in a big way. Like, the science of what is going on is really, really heavily pushed in part 2, and part 2 was the most boring bit for me in terms of I enjoyed what was happening overall, but I felt like there were so many passages of reams and reams of text that just did not need to be explained in such detail. I get that Stevenson is known for this, and for me it didn't work that well. I think he could have definitely cut it out and it would have been a much more concise, snappy, interesting story, whereas I know that he intentionally put it in because that's what he likes to do, and for people who are really into science and they know a lot about it, it probably works really well. But because I'm not a scientist and I don't fully understand everything he was talking about, it didn't really grip me and it didn't really keep me hooked. It was more of a, it's interesting to hear about, but I was a bit bored by the time he'd finished. That sort of situation. Part 3 is basically a completely different book. Part 2 ends with what could have been the ending of the book. Part 3 is then a massive jump forwards in time to where all of our main characters who we met initially have died, they're long gone, and we've got a whole different set of characters. I really enjoyed part 3, but it was a completely different book, essentially. It felt as though it could have ended at part 2, and then book 3 could have been an entirely new series, an entirely new story. Although there were links, of course, there were definite links between the two, it felt very tacked on to give more of a justification, and it was a long section as well. I thought maybe it would be like a chapter or two just to sort of round everything off. It wasn't that at all. It was a really long section, and we follow this character through her life, and we get to see sort of how generations have continued and what's been the progression of humankind, if there even is still a humankind. All of that stuff is kind of explained and debated in part 3. It was really interesting, it was really thought-provoking. I felt the characterization in part 3 was a little bit better than that in part 2 and part 1. I felt like we got to know our main character a bit better, and we got to see and understand them more. It was interesting, it was really interesting. So, on the whole, the writing style was not necessarily quite as snappy as I would like. I think it could have been a lot shorter and a lot more quick and fun and exciting. I did appreciate what Stephenson was trying to do, and I thought the general premise of the story was really, really good, and he handled the way that the story unfolded very well. I felt like there were a lot of key things that he explained about how it would be possible for this to happen, and he really did make it sound like it was a plausible thing in the way that he explained it. I mean, I don't know how plausible it really is because I'm not a scientist, but it did seem plausible from his explanations. I think he did it really, really well. I just didn't think that the pacing was quick enough or fun enough for my liking. I did go into it with that as an expectation. I knew it was going to be very sciencey and very heavy on the science, and it was. And so I wasn't disappointed by that. I just had to plough a little bit through that in order to get to the stuff that I was like, yeah, this is really exciting, crazy things are happening, we're in space, we're flying around, there's all sorts of terrible things going on. So I needed to get to that point, and I had to wade through some science to get there. On the whole, I thought it was a very, very readable book, even though it is heavy on science. The science is hard to wrap your brain around, but what is actually going on overall is not hard to understand. It can feel a bit taxing and draining when you are in a really long passage of science, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I do have another book on my bookshelf back at home, which is a read, and that one is also by Neal Stephenson, and that one has a very different type of focus. I'm quite interested in picking that up at some point, but I did like that he really went to every length to explore and discuss science, so if I had known more about it, it would have probably been fascinating, but because I don't, it wasn't as fascinating as it could have been. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, so if you guys joined me for the buddy read, then leave me your thoughts, or if you've read it already or are interested in reading it, then definitely leave me what you are thinking as well. Does this sound like something you would really enjoy? Is it something you've read and enjoyed and I'm completely wrong? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. So, as always, leave me your comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat.